Well, good morning, everyone. We're going to continue a bit on this idea of change your thinking, change your life that we started last week. And last week we dealt with an aspect of thinking called memory. You know, what are memories? Where do memories come from? Where do they go? How do we deal with memories? How can we change them if they ought to be changed? Are we compelled to feel the same way and act the same way every time we remember the same thing? Or can we, as conscious, choosing beings, can we, as a memory comes to us, can we choose how to react and how to respond to it? Change your thinking, change your life. To learn how to think is to learn how to live. And we as human beings, if you consider what sets us apart from the rest of the creatures on this planet, we as human beings, we seem to have a different capacity for thinking. We seem to. We may not always use it in the best and most constructive way possible, but we seem to have some sort of an ability to deal with this thing called thoughts, whatever thoughts are, to organize them somehow in a manner that we really don't understand, but yet we do. And to direct them for a particular aim, a particular purpose, a particular goal. And that's what an intention is, but by the definition we're using today. Today's talk is pay attention to your intentions. Pay attention. Be aware of. Be conscious of. Deliberately choose your intentions. And your intentions then would be your aim, your purpose, your goal, your expectation. What do you expect to have happen now? What is it that you choose, deliberately choose? What is it that you are choosing to allow the divine life that has created you, that is expressing through you, that is expressing as you? What is it that you choose to allow it to experience, for you to experience today? So as we kind of get into this feeling, right, into this feeling of being at one with, right? And I love the little meme where it says atonement is really at one meant. Atonement. Recognizing our unity, recognizing our oneness with life. The only sin is the sin of unconsciousness. All of our troubles come from a false belief in separation. At one meant dissolves both of those things. Brings into our conscious awareness, into our attention at the moment, the fact that we are one. Dissolves ideas of separation as they are replaced by ideas of oneness and of unity. So I'd like to start this morning with giving us a visual image. Vernon Howard wrote a very powerful book called Psychopictography. I believe he was a Unity minister down in Atlanta years ago. And I haven't heard him speak. I never heard him speak. But people would come to the Durham church who had heard Vernon Howard speak, and they would tell me I was listening to his Sunday talks. And he wrote this little book called Psychopictography. And in the book he says that the image, the mental image that we create or that we establish, I don't know that creation is the right word, but we establish a mental image, and we remember those long after we remember the words that went into a sermon or a Sunday talk or a lecture or whatever you want to call it. And this is why the teachers of old, teachers today, use parables, use little stories that create mental pictures so that people can take away that mental picture. They can take that away and they can remember that. And they'll remember the essence of that picture long after they've forgotten whatever the topic was. Jesus spoke in parables that were very familiar to the people of his time and place. He spoke of the shepherd and the sheep. He spoke of sowing and reaping. He spoke of fishing. These were things that ordinary people understood. And when they had this message tied to that picture, then as they went about their ordinary business, they would remember. So the image that came to my mind this morning as I was just kind of sitting and listening to these ideas, as these ideas unfolded, revealed themselves to me. I don't know how else to put it. I can't tell you that I created a talk because I didn't. But I had an intention. I had an intention for ideas to reveal themselves to me and through me. And that's the creative process for me. That's how it works. It's kind of like I sit and just pay attention to these things that appear on my field of consciousness. So there was a movie, Amadeus is the name of the movie, and we showed it at Spiritual Cinema, or Metaphysical Movies we called it. Other churches called it Spiritual Cinema. We showed it one night at the Wilmington Church. And the opening scene of the movie is very powerful, and I'm sure it's available on YouTube if you look for it. Just that opening scene. But it's a very, very starry night, and it's out in the country, and it's a very deep dark. A deep darkness, not polluted with lights like we are here in our cities. And this young boy, a young teenager, maybe 12, 13-year-old boy, slides open his bedroom window, and he crawls out, and he drops to the ground, and he starts running through the darkness. He starts running across a field. And of course the camera's following him, tracking him at a distance. And he goes to this pond. There's a little pond on this farm. And he takes his clothes off and he dives into the water. And he swims out into the middle of the pond and he rolls over on his back and he looks up. And of course the camera adopts his point of view and it points up. And we see this beautiful, beautiful starry sky, Just beautiful. The Milky Way, the galaxy, the stars, everything. It's just complete darkness, and it's accented by the stars. And he's just laying there, and he's just looking up in awe at these stars. And of course, then the camera switches its point of view, and it's way up above him, and it's looking down at the pond. And it's in on a tight shot of his face. And then the camera starts widening its field of view. It starts pulling out. And what we see is, in the pond, in the stillness of the black waters of the pond, we see the reflection of the heavens. So here's this boy's face, and the appearance is, it is completely surrounded by the cosmos. Above him, below him, around him, because of the reflection of the stars on the water. It just looks like he is completely suspended in space. In every direction, just space, just stars, just vastness, just the awesomeness of the universe. So I want you to kind of get that image. Think of yourself as being there. And you're just kind of suspended. You're just kind of floating in the cosmos. You're just kind of floating in the heavens. But what is going on around you, what is passing around you is consciousness, is thought, is ideas, is information. It is just kind of flowing past you. So I don't know what picture works for you. In the cartoons, when somebody would be trying to solve a problem, like a scientist in a cartoon, the ideas would float by as mathematical formulas in a cloud bubble. Sometimes you may picture ideas floating by as still images or moving images with or without sound. Sometimes they're just sound bites that might be going by, kind of like we're listening to an old radio and somebody's turning the dial, and you just get little snippets of sound bites here and there as these things kind of pass through. And other times they might just be emotions. They might be feelings. Have you ever walked into a room and you can feel the tension in the room? There's something in there that's palpable. There's something. You walk in and your gut immediately tightens. There's something going on in that room. Or you walk into a room and there's a feeling of joy. There's a feeling of happiness. Or you're in someone's presence and you have this feeling. So think of yourself. Think of you. Now you're replacing that little boy in the visual. And here you are. And you're just suspended. You're just suspended in space. And all of these thoughts and all of these ideas and all of the human consciousness, the collective consciousness of Jung, the race consciousness that Ernest Holmes talked about, all of these ideas are surrounding you, and some of them are actually flying into you and bumping off of you. But within this vastness, there's a bubble around you. Remember the movie The Boy in the Plastic Bubble? There's this bubble around you. And that bubble represents your consciousness. And now you start to realize that you have the ability to decide and to choose which of these thoughts that are flying around get to stay in your bubble. Now, no one else can do this for you. I can't go in there and decide what's going to be in your bubble. You are the only thinker in your universe, and you are the only one who can make this decision. Now, for most of us, we're not even aware most of the time of what's in our bubble. We're not consciously thinking, we're not consciously choosing, oh, I'll let this one in, oh, I'll put that one out. But we have that ability to do so. We have that ability to do so. So I want you to imagine then, as we're listening, as we're going through these ideas today, I want you to imagine then that what your role in life is to take charge of your part of that bubble, your bubble that is that part of consciousness, your part of consciousness. Now, if we do nothing, if we do nothing at all, what we find is that each of us attracts to ourselves ideas and thoughts and people and circumstances that are a reflection or an outpicturing of whatever is going on at an unconscious level in our thought process, in our consciousness. Dr. Holmes would say that we each have a mental atmosphere. We surround ourselves with a mental atmosphere. Some people can say that they can see it as an aura, but we are surrounded by the mental atmosphere. This is what we feel when we walk into a room. We are surrounded by this mental atmosphere. And if we take no action whatsoever, if we do not deliberately choose, then we are accepting things that are coming to us that are in tune, I'll put it in terms of the old teachers, in tune with the vibrations of our consciousness. Just like attracts like. We'll just leave it as that. So think of this then. You are in that bubble. You are in that bubble in the cosmos, and there are all of these thoughts, and there are all of these ideas whirling around you. But you get to choose. You must choose. And you are choosing. So this brings us then to pay attention to your intentions. Pay attention to your intentions. Now, what are intentions? For the sake of today, we're going to use the definition that your intention is an aim, a goal, or a plan, or a purpose. This is straight from a dictionary. An intention. That's an intention. Now, you may remember Napoleon Hill's works, Think and Grow Rich. Now, he was commissioned to write that book by Andrew Carnegie. Now, Carnegie had amassed a fortune in the steel industry. Came over as an immigrant from Scotland, and he became at the time the wealthiest person in the world. And Carnegie believed that every person could achieve success if they understood how to do it. So Carnegie commissioned Napoleon Hill to go and write this book. And Carnegie gave Napoleon Hill letters of introduction to some of the key people he knew, one of them being Henry Ford. And Napoleon Hill spent 20 years going around interviewing people who were extremely successful at what they did. And then he wrote this book, Think and Grow Rich. Now, a couple things I want to mention. I couldn't find it this morning when I went looking for it, but at one time I went back, I think it was when the movie The Secret was going around, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And the movie The Secret was based on a book, I think it was by Waddles, I think was the author's name. But in the late 1800s, early 1900s, there were many teachers who were writing books about the power of our thought, to attract to ourselves or to attract us to the circumstances that we desired. And Carnegie had read and studied with one of those authors, but I couldn't find the name this morning. But Henry Ford read Ralph Waldo Trine's book, In Tune with the Infinite, and Henry Ford liked that book so well that he bought it by the case, and he would give copies of it to his business associates. So the reason I mention this is I believe that when Napoleon Hill was going around interviewing these successful business people, that what he was getting fed back to him was part of what we would call new thought, but filtered through the eyes of a business person, focused on objectives, focused on accomplishments, focused on doing things and getting things, right? And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with those, but that's the orientation that people in business would have, right? How do I use this in order to help my business along? That would be their interest. So Napoleon Hill wrote this book, and if you go back and read the book, it is entirely, from start to finish, it is entirely based on the premise that you must have and declare, write down, and read to yourself twice a day your chief aim in life, your chief purpose in life. What is it that you wish to accomplish in life? And he took it a step further, and he said, and you have to add to that, what is it that you are willing to do in order to get that? What is the service that you offer to the world in order for you to accomplish your chief purpose in life? And what Napoleon Hill wrote over and over again was, we have to take this desire, we have to raise that desire to a white hot heat. We have to flame it into a white hot heat. It has to become a passion. It has to become, an overriding passion, a compulsion, if you will, in our lives. That this is our purpose in life. Now, he tells us that desire is the starting point of all achievement. Right? Anything we've achieved started as a desire somewhere. Somebody wanted it. Somebody wanted to do it. But desire alone is not enough. See? We have to move that into action. We have to have the intention to have it. So if you think of all of the different things that you and I could sit here right now, if I gave you 2 minutes and a blank piece of paper and said, write down all of the things that you want, you could probably fill that paper. But they are just wishes. They are just wants. They are just kind of nice to haves. Which of those do you really intend to experience in your life? What is your intention? See? And I think that's the next step. The next step is going from desire to intention. Well, of all of these different things that I could think of that would be nice to have in my life, which ones do I intend? Which ones do I intend? And then what am I doing about it? See? What is my plan? And now I'm speaking entirely from Napoleon Hill's level, the level 1 consciousness of doing, right? Doing. So we can see then that based on what he has written and what he has passed on to us, that in the physical realm of accomplishing things on planet Earth, whether it be to accumulate wealth, whether it be to be a great service to humanity, to build a great charitable organization, to build a school, to teach, all of these things, whatever that desire is, we have to have the intention to see it through. We have to have the intention to make it happen. Now, Napoleon Hill, he wrote that the reason that this technique worked, right? Remember, his whole technique is make a decision what you're going to have, be clear about it, be specific about it, and repeat it to yourself over and over and over again, several times a day. Repeat it to yourself so that it just becomes a part of you. It just becomes, the essence of who you are. And he said the reason that works is that there's a spiritual law in the universe that makes it work. But he was not going to tell the readers what that spiritual law was. And he said the reason he would not go into that in that particular book was because people would think he was trying to convert them to a new religion. And he didn't want to get caught up in that discussion because he wasn't trying to convert anybody to any religion. He was just trying to explain, as best he understood from his interviewing over a 20-year period, these very successful people, how it worked. Not why it worked, how it worked. So if you want something, this is what you do. That was his whole basic technique. Now, we used to teach a prosperity class, and we would teach the 3 levels of consciousness, the 3 levels of prosperity. I would start with Napoleon Hill's book on Think and Grow Rich. And if that's where people are in consciousness, if that's what appeals to them, and then that's a good place to start, because you have to choose, you have to decide, you have to make your intention, you have to declare your intention, and then you have to follow through. All good things. The next level of the workshop, we would introduce Eric Butterworth's spiritual economics. So Eric Butterworth's, then he would explain the law. He would explain why the law worked. Why is it that when we set our intention, why is it that when we get clear, why is it that these things, this very act of getting clear and of deciding, why is it that things seem to change in our lives? So that was the level 2 consciousness, which is kind of, what I would say is Gnostic consciousness, knowing about why things work. And then for the 3rd level, we would introduce Joel Goldsmith's spiritual supply, which is the mystical level, which is it doesn't matter why the law works, it doesn't matter how the law works. What matters is your oneness with the divine, because out of that oneness with the divine, all other things fall into place. So we can see in the very practical life, we can see in business, for example, or in accomplishing goals in our life, as Napoleon Hill would tell us, we can see the importance of intention. We can understand that we as human beings, we have this ability to think, we have this ability to choose, we have this ability to decide. And that seems to be what distinguishes what human beings have done, for better or worse, on the planet. Think of the tallest skyscraper in the world. I don't even know where it is these days. But think of the tallest skyscraper in the world. That started as an idea. That started as a decision. Somebody said, we're going to build a building and it's going to be the tallest building in the world. That was a choice. That was volition. That was will. But they moved that forward. They moved that forward with more specific action. Somebody sat down. In the olden days, they would have sat down with a pencil and paper and drawn blueprints. Now they probably do it on a computer, using a CAD, a that was in their head, in their mind, or in their consciousness, wherever we want to say it, this idea that they accepted, that they latched onto, that they declared was their own, then started to take form. It started to take shape. It became blueprints on a computer program. It became material lists. It became bids for subcontractors. See? It became all of these things, and then eventually it started to take physical form. You know, heavy equipment came in and prepared the site. Beams were pounded into the ground. Concrete was poured for foundation, and bit by bit, the building was erected. You know, the framework went up, the cladding went on, the interiors were built, the electricity was run. When the World Trade Centers were being built in the 70s, I worked in the next building right across the street, in the phone company building, and we would watch that go up every day. We would watch that go up. When I started working, it was just this huge hole in the ground, and it was so big, the hole in the ground was so big, that one day I asked somebody, I said, "What is that big water pipe running through that hole down there?" And they chuckled at me, and they said, "That's not a water pipe, that's the subway train. That's the tunnel for the subway train. It goes under the Hudson River, the Hudson Tubes." And they had unearthed it, and they had put bracing structures all underneath it, kind of holding it in place as they built this building around it. But little by little, day by day, we watched those towers go up until eventually they were finished. All of this started as an idea, as an intention in a human mind, So we understand then, from a purely practical level, if I just want to make a good living, if I want to be successful in life, I have to be a conscious chooser. I have to decide. I have to pay attention. I have to focus on the things that are important to me. I have to keep them at the forefront. I have to eliminate distractions. All of these things that self-help motivational teachers have taught for probably thousands of years. But now we move into the spiritual realm. We move out of the Napoleon Hill realm, more or less, into the Eric Butterworth realm. And now we start to take on a new importance, a greater importance, as to why we need to do this. We live in a spiritual universe. We live in a spiritual universe that responds to us according to our belief. It responds to us. We get to choose. We get to decide. Or we get to not choose and not decide. But either way, there's a power in the universe. We call it the law of mind. There's a power in the universe that responds to us according to our belief. And it is always responding. Always. All the time. 24/7. It is always responding to us according to our belief. Now, it may be nice when you're thinking about business, and you're thinking about finance, and you're thinking about careers, and you're thinking about all things. It may be nice to sit down every once in a while and set your goals for the year, you know. We used to have 30, 60, 90-day objectives, yearly objectives, you know, and everything was on rolling scale, you know. I'd come in this month and make a report on my 30, 60, 90-day objectives, and then next month I would make a report on my 30, 60, 90-day objectives, and of course those that were 60 were 90 the previous month. Always keep your eye on the ball, always keep focus, always keep attention, all those kind of things. But how much more important is it to us when we recognize that there's a power in the universe that responds to us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, according to our belief? How much more important is it to us to be aware of our intentions, to deliberately choose our intentions, to to eliminate the things that we have allowed to attach themselves to us that do not serve our aim, our goal, our purpose in our spiritual life. In our spiritual life. So here then comes kind of the pinnacle, if you will, of what we're talking about. Change your thinking, change your life. It's done unto you according to your belief. But how many of us go through the day, go through life, largely unconscious? We're awake, we're not asleep, I'm not talking about that. But we're not deliberately choosing. We're not deliberately deciding. We're kind of going into the day, and what comes, and we deal with it, and we get through the day, and then, and then we go back home. But if we truly understand that there's a power in the universe that responds to us according to our belief, and it's responding whether we have deliberately chosen those beliefs, we have deliberately set our intention, or not, and then it becomes of the utmost importance to be deliberately choosing, to be aware. First, to be aware, to be conscious. And we're reading in our Wednesday night group, we're reading Thich Nhat Hanh's book on mindfulness meditation. Because most of the time we are not mindful. Most of the time we are here, but our mind is someplace else doing something else. We have to be here now. We have to be present now. We have to be aware right now of what it is that we are identifying with, that we are attaching ourselves to. And we don't do that. As human beings, we don't do that. Now, very, very quickly, if you think about evolution, I love this. Ernest Holmes says there's no doubt that human beings have come from evolution, but that means that we have evolved from a principle. There was a principle behind it. There's something behind it pushing it forward. And it's as if we have come from this magnificent universal life, this universal divine, this universal love, this universal power, and we have evolved through all of these different phases and stages till we could get to the point where we could recognize that, Thomas Troward tells us that the point of evolution was to produce a creature capable of recognizing its ability to think and its oneness with God, and that is us. So we have arrived at this place in the evolution of consciousness where we are capable of being aware, of choosing deliberately, and now we have to put that to work. See? So evolution has moved us forward to this point, and in the process of evolution, it was important that we do something once, and then we kind of do it on automatic pilot after that, so our brains could go on and learn something new. But now we're at the point where we have to be aware. We have to stop functioning on autopilot. We have to be aware. We have to consciously choose. And the reason that we have to consciously choose is twofold. One is nobody else can do it for us. And the other is there's a power in the universe that is responding to us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whether we like it or not. Gravity is holding us to the face of this planet, whether we like it or not. We can't stop gravity from doing that. There's a power in the universe that responds to us exactly according to our belief, whether we like it or not. And we cannot escape. We cannot escape its effects. We cannot escape the fact that it is doing so. And we cannot escape our responsibility and our accountability to use it wisely. In the East, they say you can't outrun your karma. You can't outrun your karma. Whatever's going on in our lives is an outpicturing of the sum total of our consciousness. And if we do nothing, we get more of the same. We do more of the same. So sometimes things will happen in somebody's life and they'll say, well, I wasn't thinking about that. I wasn't thinking about having that happen. I wasn't thinking about getting that disease. I wasn't thinking about having an accident in my car or whatever. And the question really is, well, what were you thinking? What was your intention? Did you deliberately have any intention whatsoever, or did you just get up out of bed and take each day as it came and allow yourself to be subject to the mediocrity of race consciousness, right? The law of averages, the law of averages. So the commercial comes on TV and it says it's flu season and 2 out of every 3 people is going to get the flu. And if we don't do anything to insulate, inoculate, isolate our consciousness from that, if we accept that, if we allow that to become attached to our consciousness, then we don't have to be thinking about getting the flu. We weren't thinking about health, is the point. We didn't have an intention of health. So let's go back to the image then of you're in your plastic bubble, and what's in your plastic bubble is the area of consciousness under your direct control. And now we start to wonder, well, what's in there? See, how do I know what's in there? That's another question people come up with. Oh my goodness, now how do I go in and figure out what's in there so I can get rid of it? And the answer is you don't figure out what's in there. You replace what's in there with the ideas that you want, with the thoughts that you want, with the intentions that you want. Dr. Holmes gives us the visual image. If you take a glass of water and you put a few drops of ink in that water, the ink will diffuse and the entire water will turn, tinted. It'll be the tint of whatever color ink you put in there. This is the example of this is your consciousness before you have deliberately accepted your responsibility to go in there and do something with it. And he said, now go in there and get the ink out. And you say, well, I can't do that. I can't stick my hand in there and pull the ink out. How do I get the ink out? And he says, you put the glass of water under the tap and you slowly let the tap run into the glass of water. And as clear water goes into the glass, the inky water spills out of the glass, and over time, what's left in the glass is clear water. This is your consciousness. This is the consciousness within the bubble. You want to keep deliberately putting ideas, putting intentions into that bubble for the good that you will have in your life, for the good that you ought to have in your life. Now, another thing about dealing with the consciousness in the bubble is sometimes people want to think about what they don't want. They're so hung up on something that's in the bubble that's negative that they keep thinking about it. And Emmett Fox gave a beautiful example of this. He was a pastor in New York City. And he said to everybody, he says, you've all seen the Statue of Liberty. Lady Liberty is right down there in the harbor downtown. You've all seen her standing there, the green statue with the torch held up and the crown on her head and holding the tablets on her side. And he says, has everybody got that image of the Statue of Liberty? And of course everybody did. He said, good, now just stop thinking about the Statue of Liberty. And he started talking. And he said, he says, how are you doing? Have you stopped thinking about the Statue of Liberty? I want you to stop. Don't think about that Statue of Liberty. And he would talk some more and he'd go back and say, have you stopped? And of course everybody was struggling because the more he said, don't think about the Statue of Liberty, the more the image of the Statue of Liberty came in their mind. This is what happens when we try not to think about something, right? So he went into his talk and he went on for a little while and he started telling everybody about the time he was in Paris. He took a trip to Paris. He had lived in England. He was an Englishman. I think he was an Irishman who lived in England, and he came over here. And he was telling everybody about his trip to Paris, and he was telling about what a marvel of engineering the Eiffel Tower was. He was explaining the construction of the Eiffel Tower. He was explaining how the metal was put together. He was explaining how the elevators ran by using water ballast for counterweights. You know, and people would get in a car on one side, and on the other side they would fill something with water, and the weight of the water would and as he was describing in great detail how the Eiffel Tower worked, how the elevators worked, how it was put together, he says, now, is anybody still thinking about the Statue of Liberty? And of course they weren't. They were thinking about the Eiffel Tower. And this is the point with that. Take active control of your consciousness and think about what you want to be thinking about. Pay attention to your intentions and be putting into your field of consciousness and accepting into your field of consciousness only those things you want to have happen in your life. That's it. Only those things that you want to have happen in your life. As you do that, then you just like the clear water from the tap clears up the inky water in the glass. As you do that, then the consciousness that is your bubble of consciousness, it takes on a different color, a different tone, a different atmosphere, a different vibration, if you want to call it that. And now you start to attract into your life of all of the ideas, of all of the people, of all the emotions, of all of the things that go by you. You start to attract into your life those things that can help you fulfill your intention. Fulfill your intention. So kind of to recap, it is done unto us according to our belief, but most of the time we are not in conscious charge of our beliefs. Ideas come into our field of consciousness and we go, oh, I had an idea and that's my idea. And we take ownership and we attach ourselves to it. And we need to let go of that. And that's an idea. There goes an idea. Here comes an idea. There goes an idea. Not my idea. I don't have to get attached to it. I don't have to claim it as my own. And once again, I'll mention that meditation as a practice, as a spiritual practice, meditation helps us to break that attachment, to let go of that erroneous belief that everything that pops up in my field of consciousness is my idea and I need to do something with it. That is not true at all. We can learn to ignore them. We can learn to detach from the emotions. This is what we talked about last week with remembering. Every time we remember something, we don't have to act and react the same way. We can choose. We can also be mindful. And we don't have to spend a lot of time being mindful about how things got into our consciousness or why they are in our consciousness, but we can be mindful about what we want to experience right now. So we get up in the morning, what is our intention for the day? And I'm not talking about just for 2 seconds in the morning to say, I intend for this to be a beautiful day. And that's good as far as it goes. It's better than nothing, for sure. But to follow the example of Napoleon Hill, how many times during the day are we reminding ourselves of our intention? How many times are we reminding ourselves that our intention is to fill our consciousness with kind and loving thoughts? Our intention is to be the best expression of God's love we can be this day. Our intention is to grow deeper in our spiritual understanding of the unity, of the oneness, of the power that is God. The divine mind cannot do for us what it has created us to do for ourselves. It cannot choose for us. It has given us will. It has given us volition. And I think this is the lesson from all of the metaphors of sin of the Garden of Eden, of Adam and Eve being cast out of the garden, which is an allegory. You and I can choose, and we are choosing. Even when we're not choosing, we're choosing mediocrity. And we can use that power to choose, the freedom of will, the volition. We can use that power to choose things that create pain and suffering in our lives. But it is not until we learn to choose from the tree of life, to fill our consciousness with goodness, to pay attention, to be mindful of our intentions. See, it is not until we do those things that we can return to the garden and eat from the tree of life. So it's up to us. The divine will not choose for us. We're able to choose for ourselves, and we must choose for ourselves. And the question that we must consider this week, as we go through this week, is what are your intentions? Right? And when something unexpected happens, it's a great opportunity to say, well, what was my intention with regard to this? What was I expecting? I think the most of the time you'll say, well, I didn't have any expectation. I didn't have any intention with regard to this. And then the little light bulb should go off and you should go, aha, aha. I was asleep at the switch and this is what I got. So your full-time job, 24/7, even when you sleep, your full-time job is to be mindful, is to be aware, and to only entertain, to only permit those ideas in your field of awareness that are constructive for your intention, for your purpose, for your aim. So if something to the contrary comes up, not mine, what was that meme they put on Facebook? Not my circus, not my monkeys, not mine, move along, nothing to see here. Get thee behind me, Satan. I am in charge of my thinking, no one else. I am in charge of my consciousness, no one else. I am the only one who can do this. And today I set my intention, today, to exercise dominion over the one thing that I can. And that is my consciousness, my intention. I pay attention to my intentions, and so it is.